Hi everyone, John Epp here, curator at the USS Slater in Albany, New York. In this video, we're continuing our deck log series as we follow the Slater from commissioning through her World War II service. Let's see what she was up to in her second week of service. On the 8th of May, Slater continues to be moored starboard side to the Mallory Dock in Tampa, Florida. At 0623, a representative of General Motors, a Mr. Kosak, joined the ship for transportation to Key West. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Murphy of the United States Naval Reserve also reported aboard for transportation. Lieutenant Johnson of the United States Coast Guard came aboard to act as pilot, and at 0701, Slater got underway. Johnson was at the con with the captain, executive officer, and the navigator on the bridge. 1/3 speed was shifted to standard speed of 16 knots at 0730. At 0800, the crew was mustered at their stations. Copeland, Folds, and Terrell remain absent. At 1025, structural firing tests were conducted for all of Slater's 3-inch 50 caliber deck guns. Her 20mm Orlikins, 40mm Bofors, and her Mark 11 Hedgehog projector. These tests lasted just over 2 hours, ending at 12:30. Here, you can see how much ammunition was expended. After a compass compensation, the Coast Guard vessel CG 38798 came along the port side, and Lieutenant Johnson departed. At 1639, 2 depth charges were dropped and set to 30 feet. The first depth charge was fired by remote control from the bridge, and after it detonated, the second was fired via local control. At 1709, a sound echo was registered, and general quarters was sounded. Various course changes and engine speed changes are registered for the next 2 hours, until the ship was secured from general quarters at 1858. Zigzag plan number 10 was commenced at 2100, and general quarters at 2255. A minute later, zigzagging ceased, and at 2325, the ship again secured from general quarters, and a war cruising watch was set. Zigzag plan number 10 resumed at 2330. The next morning, the ship is continuing her voyage from Tampa, Florida, to Key West. At 0236, the evaporator was secured. And fun fact, the Slater no longer has her boiler system, or the evaporator. At some point during her Greek service, they were removed. At 0525, an unknown vessel was sighted and illuminated with one of Slater's 2 24-inch searchlights. Nothing else is mentioned about this vessel, but it can safely be assumed they were friendly. Morning muster, and our 3 sailors, Copeland, Folds, and Terrell, are still marked as absent. A little bit of excitement happened at 10:09. As the ship was entering the Key West area, the ship suffered a steering casualty, and control was shifted to her after steering, and all engines were stopped. Within a few minutes, normal steering was restored to the bridge. Now, as an aside, the next time you visit the Slater, be sure to ask about our Stem to Stern tour. Not only will you get to experience the normal tour, but you also see our engineering compartments and our collection space. And within this, after steering is also checked out. At 11:42, Slater was safely moored starboard side to Dock A in Key West, Florida. Some fuel was taken on, and at 12:52, Mr. Kosak, the civilian, who had joined the ship in Tampa, departed. The first of many captain's mass was awarded by the executive officer. Seaman second class Pebbles, Hargroves, and Hatfield were apparently caught doing something they shouldn't have. Now, on this page, we see a summary of the day. The average engine revolutions for various times, the ship's course, wind direction and wind speed, the barometer and temperature readings, clouds and sea state. For this date, the Slater expended 16,250 gallons of fuel, distilled 170 gallons of water, but it expended 5,495 gallons. And finally, the magazine temperatures in B106M registered 85 degrees, and in A305M, 73 degrees. On the 10th of May, Slater made preparations for getting underway to a new dock for deperming or degaussing. Simply put, degaussing is the act of demagnetizing the ship. Since the ship is made of steel, as it cuts through the water, a static charge builds up along the hull. Special ships were actually built during the war, such as the USS Derpham, ADG 10, for the purpose of easily degaussing another ship. While in Key West, Slater received a degaussing treatment. Captain's Mast was also held this date. Seaman Second Class Hargrove was awarded deck court for smoking on war cruising watch 2 days prior. Seaman Second Class Pebbles failed to man his station during general quarters, and he also used the 1MC to call someone on the fantail. He was awarded summary court-martial. And finally, Seaman Second Class Hatfield was caught sleeping on war cruising watch. He lost 5 liberties as a result. At 1400, deck court for Hargroves commenced and adjourned 20 minutes later to prepare for the degaussing. After this was completed, the findings and sentence in the case against Hargroves was published. He was sentenced to confinement to the ship for 20 days and a loss of $20. Now, in 1944, $20 was still a lot of money. In 2022, that's a little over $300. Later that evening, Slater received 3 Mark 8 Mod 3D torpedoes. Slater no longer has her torpedo mounts in 2022. These were actually removed prior to the end of World War II. Here we also see the ship receive 16,330 gallons of fuel, expended 5,200, 160 gallons of water were distilled, and 6,805 gallons were brought on board. 7,155 was expended. The next day, Lieutenant Kane reported aboard to compensate the magnetic compasses. If you are watching this video in May of 2022, then we are actually in the process of restoring our secondary conning station, including the magnetic compass. Make sure you are subscribed so you can tune into our weekly maintenance vlogs. Also check out our Facebook page, where photos of the restoration work will be posted. More degaussing work was conducted on this date as well. Mr. Konzet, a degaussing physicist, came aboard, as did Lieutenant J.G. Małkowski. The tug Rufus Goldberg secured herself to our bow, and a second tug came in a little too fast and actually dented the port side hull near frame 150. Pilot Lieutenant Rubin came aboard, presumably to check for damage because he quickly left the ship. At 0925, Slater proceeded to the degaussing range and adjusted her speed and course to tweak the degaussing settings. At 10:51, the evaporators began filling C14 with water for the degaussing process. At 14:21, the magnetic compass compensating was completed and the ship's 2 guests departed via motor launch. A general quarters drill was exercised later that evening as Slater began a return trip to Tampa. Over the course of 24 hours, the ship expended 1,505 gallons of fuel, received 4,200 gallons of fresh water, and expended 3,800. She continued to sail into the early morning hours of 12 May at full speed. The ship was darkened and a war cruising watch was set. At 0100, the bilges were pumped, and the 4 16-cylinder diesel engines were all inspected. A sailing vessel passed close aboard on the starboard beam, and a second sailing vessel also passed by at 0414. And 2 hours later, the sound gear and pit log were secured as Slater entered the channel for Tampa. The Coast Guard pilot, Lieutenant Commander Kleischman, came aboard to bring Slater into port, and at 0910, she was once again moored to the Mallory dock in Tampa, Florida. The three crew also remained absent, though not for long. At 1447, Copeland was returned to the ship under the custody of Shore Patrol. Seaman Second Class L.A. Chapman was also returned to the ship by Shore Patrol at 2305. He presumably left the ship shortly after she returned to Tampa. Now, did he leave with a Liberty Pass, but was caught misbehaving? Or did he sneak off without permission? Maybe we will find out in future entries. On this day, Slater also expended 4,310 gallons of fuel, distilled 1,210 gallons of water, and expended 5,465 gallons. The 13th of May was a quiet day for most. After morning muster, with Folds and Tyrrell still absent, the ship moved 100 yards astern on Mallory docks. A captain's inspection was held at 1000 hours, and at 1100 hours, captain's mast was held. Later in the evening, 6,900 gallons of fresh water were taken aboard. Now, the figures for fuel show 79,330 gallons were received, while 3,200 were expended. The water numbers do differ from what was mentioned earlier. 3,535 gallons were distilled, and 5,160 were received. Just over 3,000 were expended. And on the 14th, Slater continued to be moored portside to the Mallory dock in Tampa, Florida, and Folds and Tyrrell remained absent. At 0825, articles for the government of the Navy were read to the crew, and the magazines were inspected and found to be satisfactory. Since the ship did not move, no fuel was expended, though 6,900 gallons of water were received, and the crew expended 3,185. That will do it for this week in Slater's Deck Logs. Be sure to subscribe and turn on that bell for notifications, because you won't want to miss next week's video. The saga of Folds and Tyrrell changes, and Slater encounters her first casualties. Let us know if you enjoy these videos by leaving a comment down below. And until next time, take care, folks.